Right, welcome to another investigation here. Now, this one's with Anglo-Saxon. Now, if you notice, the Anglo-Saxon race, they're basically referring to Germanic peoples, English, Welsh and all this, like basically the European peoples, right, is what it refers to, Anglo-Saxon. So basically referring to the group that lives in the sort of northern Europe, like the England, France, Germany, probably going into like the place like Denmark or something like that, Norway, right? Basically that area, right? And it's basically obviously the sort of European race group, Anglo-Saxon. Now, obviously, right, the World War I and II is always about England versus Germany, or Britain versus Germany, in a sort of war sides. Right? This obviously would divided Europe. Right? It divided Europe, this European region, into like a sort of hostility and mistrust, right, which sort of exists to this day, really. Now, if we take the idea, right, that this was contrived, right, it was basically Masonic, and it was basically a contrived scenario, right, as we know the methods that they use, right. Say for example this, right, we know that this, right, was totally fake. Most people totally realise that now, that this was fake, right, and some form of political based agenda to obviously bring Islam and Muslim type of things into people's consciousness, right, in order for the upcoming times, when they would then start to import, like, obviously millions of Muslims into these Western worlds, which are basically home to the Anglo-Saxon race. So basically, when you have this, like I see, a lot of people realise that the more modern events are fake, right? But these same people do not sort of look back on this and think that that was fake as well, when all the evidence would suggest that this was just as fake and contrived a scenario as the 9/11, right? Again, it was a Masonic political agenda, right? Because this basically divided the Anglo-Saxon race, right? So you've got Anglo-Saxon, and then you've got basically British and German, right? The war was between British and Germany, so the war was between Anglo and Saxon, right? So it's based on a racial division idea, right? Now, basically, if you take in the idea that the true enemies of Europe and the Anglo-Saxon race is from outside Europe, right, then you can see why they would do this, create such a scenario, right, which basically divided Europe and divided a race, a genetic race of peoples, right? So we say that genetic diversity, right, can be observed across various ethnicities. Unique genetic signatures. And all this, so the idea of genetics, right, is obviously quite big with these Masonic people, right? this is funny. You type in that, you get this result here. Historical hatred of Europe has been directed towards various groups, including the Jewish people. Now obviously we know that how this plays into the World War II scenario. Right? That's very funny. How that becomes the main answer there, right? Being termed the longest hatred. That's quite funny. There's no evidence. I mean, there's no. If you type that in, there's no answers coming forth to save someone who hated the European people. But there's answers. This just takes precedence, But there's nothing that says that the European people had any enemies in the past or anything like that, right? Which is that's quite interesting. Now, as we know, basically the majority of the knowledge and information about the World War II is basically coming on TV shows, films, movies. Even they make video games nowadays, all these type of video games, but they've never stopped basically. Even at this, present era, they're making things all the time about the World War II, and this basically keeps alive in the mind this scenario, what they created, right? You see a list of all the TV shows and that. Basically, this was one of the shows what they had, which was a comedy show, and it was about occupied France. Obviously, had a German Nazi idea, and they occupied France. Another one here, it's very similar, but played on a straight level or whatever. It would occupy France and French resistance, and all this type of thing. No one here, the enemy at the door. German occupying forces, it's always about occupation. No one here. Again, dealing with stuff about occupied France and German Nazis, right? It's always about occupied France, right? So this occupied type of idea was always they were trying to put into your mind, right, with all these drama things. Basically, an idea about being what it's like to be occupied, right? What it's like to have your country occupied and live under an occupation. Basically a foreign military authority, right? But we're using obviously the idea of a German scapegoat thing, right? Like I've pointed out, Anglo-Saxon, right, is the same race, right? So what we're doing here was completely dividing the same peoples, and putting an idea of distrust, of your own type, and in a roundabout way, right? This is like self-loathing. It creates like self-loathing in the specified target, which is Anglo-Saxon, right? It creates like a sort of self-loathing, a self-hatred, and all that, right? And basically, we're getting you used to being occupied, being invaded and taken over by a foreign power. Here you see, invasion is a military offence, a sizable number of combatants, and one geopolitical entity aggressively enter territory controlled by another such entity. Now basically, this sounds a lot like multiculturalism, bar for the aggressively type of thing. It's basically the same thing, but they're not entering aggressively. In the modern multiculturalism, they're entering by supposedly peace, right? And as we know, the peace idea, like the Trojan horse, when it was meant to be a peaceful gift, and then then obviously what came out of it was combatants type idea, that Trojan horse story. Not to start about India, of course, which is when you see this thing here, right? The Salonians, right? Thessalonians or the Salonians, right? When they cry peace, peace, and sudden destruction will come upon them. And as it says here, express a false sense of security, sudden destruction will come upon them, just as labour pains do upon a pregnant woman. False security that can lead to complacency in most believers. Right? Now, as you see here, United Nations Security Council Resolution 242, which is basically 2 6s, and lasting peace, which every state in the area can live in security. It's a peace and security. When peace and security comes upon them, then it shall be sudden destruction comes upon them. Again, this is the day after World War II, a type of idea, right? Covenant of the League of Nations. Right? And as you see who said it, right? Srita, Jaw and Akshar Mishra, right? Need prizes for guessing what they are like. Right? That wasn't none of these Masonics do everything by the biblical scriptures. Right? So you have the Thessalonians, and you have the Saddam Kitty, the high class girl and broker. So again, it's like demonizing this sort of sexual activities idea, for the again, it proved that this was all like a contrived scenario, like the World War II. And basically, I wrote out Hess with the Thessalonians, and he went to try and create peace. Apparently, went to try and create peace, right? By going across to Britain. Flew to Scotland to try and make peace with the British. Right? Again, it's based on the Thessalonians Bible story passage. Again, it looks very close together eyes. It looks like what is George Bush, built from that sort of bloodline. A character, it's like a character in a play out. Now, another thing is the Sassoon, Siegfried Sassoon. We've done all the famous war poems. I've done the Sassoon family before, but they're basically Indian Jewish. And a lot of the war type of ideas come from this one. And again, it's talking about the name Sassoon, Thessalonians. It's something to do with the Thessalonians thing from the Bible, right? Again, it's about like the horrors of war and all that, right? And how peace would be so good and all that, right? So basically, the World War II European agenda was part of a bigger worldwide agenda, right? Where they were trying to bring the European continent into, like an overall worldwide thing. And you always see that India has held a significant position as a key member of the United Nations, which seems a bit funny because obviously India's now to do with Europe and that. See the mirage of European sovereignty, very telling. I figured out post-Christian morality in these times.